Okay, back to all the way at the beginning of this class, we talked about this idea of the most important element in a particular section of the song, focusing in on some element that gives it some character. Now that we know all the tools, I want to talk a little bit about how we can emphasize that element using the tools that we now know and techniques that we now know. So, in our case, in this track here, and this is not uncommon, especially in this kind of electronic music, the most important element, kind of all the way through, I think, is the groove. Okay, so, and we've done a good job of emphasizing that already. So, let me talk outside of this track a little bit and talk about what you might find if it's not the groove. So it might be the vocal, it might be the lead vocal. That's if there is a lead vocal in your track, that's commonly what might be the thing that you really want to bring to the front. It might be the vocal, it might be a guitar solo, it might be a cool riff, it might be a weird synth thing that's happening. It could be anything. But whatever it is, there's a couple things you can do to bring it forward. The most obvious is boost the volume a little bit. And if you decide to do that, just a touch, you don't need to crank that thing up because that's going to throw your whole mix out of kilter. Just add a tiny, tiny little bit of volume, the smallest amount you can, and listen again and see if that brought it forward a little bit. If not, bring it just a tiny bit more forward. Okay, we don't want to just like crank it up. You just want to add very, very, very small amounts of volume. You can also consider using compression to bring it forward. If you compress it a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, and then bring it forward from that, using that makeup gain, that's another way to bring it forward. That's also boosting the volume, really, but it's a separate way, and it's a way to keep the mix, all the work that we've done so far in the mix, kind of still in control, right? Another thing you can do is use an EQ. Perhaps, maybe even boosting some of the higher frequencies, boosting it in places where there's not much happening in the mix. Now, I know I said try not to use an EQ to boost, but for an effect that's going to kind of bring forward this element, it might be okay. You might be able to get away with it. But an EQ can really be used to boost things forward just a little bit. And then a last thing that you can do to help kind of boost this special thing is consider adding some effects to it. That'll help give it a little bit of focus. If you want to add a little bit of delay to it, not so much that it totally changes the track, just a little bit, that might kind of help us zoom in on it, Imagine imagine the band on the stage and you've got the spotlight, right? Maybe the person who's jumping around the most is the one that's going to get our attention, right? And we're going to put the spotlight on him. So in that same way, it's kind of a weird analogy, but in that same way, if there's a sound that has, some delay on it, a little bit of echo, something like that, it might grab our attention a little bit more. And it's different than just turning the volume up a little bit, right? It's just something that kind of will grab us and pull us into it a little bit. So a couple tricks for using those techniques and tools that we know to bring out some featured element in the mix.